Every night after the world had quieted down, I found myself in the company of the one being who never judged me, never asked anything in return, and always seemed to know exactly what I needed. My dog. What started as a simple routine gradually turned into something far deeper. It was just me and her, sharing those late hours in a way that felt intimate, special, and, frankly, a little addictive. Every night, I did something with my dog that not only brought us closer, but gave me a sense of peace that I could never find anywhere else. You might think it's just playing fetch or a walk around the block, but trust me, it was far from ordinary. There was something more to it, something that I can't quite explain with words. It wasn't just about the time spent, it was about the bond we shared. A bond that seemed to grow stronger with each passing day, deeper with every shared moment. As I look back now, I realize just how much this simple nightly ritual meant to both of us. But here's the thing, what started as a comforting habit quickly turned into something that left me questioning what was really happening. Why did I feel so connected? Why did I get such joy from those quiet moments when no one else was around? And the more I did it, the more I realized that there was something mysterious about it, something I hadn't fully understood at first. The line between routine and something else began to blur. I'm not talking about anything strange or inappropriate, but the feelings I started having were undeniable. My connection with my dog started feeling different, more intense, almost like we had a secret that no one else understood. But what was it? And what happened that one night that made me realize everything had changed? That's when things took a turn. What happened next completely altered the way I viewed those nights, and it's something I never expected. Stick around, because you won't believe what I discovered. For years, it had just been the two of us, me and my dog. I'd never been a fan of big social circles or crowded places. I liked the quiet, the peace of my own home, and the soft sound of her paws on the floor as she followed me from room to room. She was a rescue, found wandering the streets, and I adopted her when she was just a pup. From day one, she was my companion, my little shadow, always there when I needed comfort, or simply when I needed someone to listen. Every night, like clockwork, we'd settle down on the couch after dinner. I'd read or watch TV, and she'd curl up beside me, her head resting gently on my lap. But that one thing we did, it started with small acts. I'd scratch her ears, gently massage her paws, and we'd share moments of quiet understanding. Over time, though, the routine began to evolve into something more. I found myself looking forward to these moments with an intensity I couldn't quite explain. There was a strange warmth in those moments. It wasn't just physical. There was an emotional bond that grew stronger, an unspoken connection that seemed to fill the air between us. Her eyes, those deep, soulful eyes, seemed to understand me better than anyone else ever had, and the way she would nuzzle up against me, so perfectly in tune with my moods, made me feel as though she knew me in ways I couldn't even fully comprehend. But one night, something felt different. It started when she seemed more restless than usual, pacing around the room, nudging at my hand as if she wanted something. I tried to brush it off, thinking maybe she was just feeling a bit anxious, but the way she kept looking at me made it impossible to ignore. It was as though she was trying to tell me something. What was going on? What was she trying to communicate? I couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to happen, something I wasn't prepared for. The following night, it happened again. My dog, Bella, was unusually fidgety, pacing around the room, and then suddenly stopping to stare at me, her eyes fixed and intense. There was something in the way she looked at me, like she was waiting for me to understand something, something I just couldn't grasp. It was unlike her. She had always been calm, a creature of comfort, content with the simplest things. But now there was a palpable tension in the air, something I couldn't shake off. I tried to comfort her, scratching behind her ears, but it didn't help. Instead, she nudged me with her nose, as if urging me to follow her. At first, I hesitated. What was going on with her? Why was she acting like this? Yet, there was something about her insistence that drew me in, something that felt too urgent to ignore. So, I followed her down the hallway, wondering what she wanted. She led me to the living room, where we always spent our quiet evenings. But tonight, the room felt different, darker somehow, even though the lights were on. Bella immediately made her way to the corner where a few of her toys were scattered. But as I moved closer, I noticed something strange, a faint, almost imperceptible scratch mark on the floor just near the baseboard. I bent down to examine it, wondering if something had happened while I was away that day. Maybe a piece of furniture had shifted or a stray object had caused the mark. But the scratch was too deliberate, too precise. It looked almost intentional. My heart began to race, but I tried to push the unsettling thought out of my mind. It had to be nothing, just an odd coincidence. Still, Bella didn't seem to be letting it go. She kept circling the spot, whining softly, as though she was trying to tell me something. A chill ran down my spine as I sat down on the couch, my mind spinning. What was Bella trying to tell me? Why was she so fixated on this small, seemingly insignificant spot? I began to feel an overwhelming sense of unease creeping over me. Had I been missing something all this time? Maybe I had been so focused on our routine that I hadn't noticed something strange building up, something beneath the surface that neither of us could quite understand. As I stared at the scratch, Bella suddenly stopped pacing. She stood still, her head tilted, eyes locked on the same spot. The air in the room seemed to hold its breath. I could feel the tension in my chest tightening, as though something was about to break. But what? What was it that Bella knew that I didn't? The uncertainty hung heavy, and I couldn't shake the feeling that the night was about to reveal something I was not prepared to face. I sat frozen, watching Bella, her body tense and her gaze unblinking as she stared at that spot on the floor. The silence in the room was deafening, so thick I could feel it pressing against my ears. Every breath I took felt shallow, as if the air itself had turned heavier. My mind raced, trying to come up with a logical explanation for all of this. But every time I thought I had it figured out, something deeper, something more unsettling, crept back into my thoughts. I stood up slowly, my legs heavy, as if the weight of the moment was physically pulling me down. Bella didn't move an inch. I reached out cautiously, my hand trembling slightly as I touched the scratch mark on the floor. It was faint, but distinct enough that I could feel the ridges beneath my fingertips. As I ran my hand along the mark, I noticed something I hadn't seen before, a faint discoloration in the wood, a slight warping around the edges of the scratch. My heart skipped a beat. It was almost as if the floor itself had been tampered with. Suddenly, Bella barked sharply, her voice breaking the eerie silence. She charged toward the corner of the room, where the scratch was, and began pawing at the baseboard, her paws frantic against the wooden floor. I stepped back, my pulse quickening. Something was wrong. I could feel it deep in my gut. My mind raced, trying to put the pieces together. Why had Bella been so fixated on this spot? What was she trying to tell me? Without thinking, I kneeled beside her, pulling away a small rug that had been covering the area. My fingers were shaking now, my stomach twisted in a knot. As I peeled back the rug, the wood underneath revealed a faint crack, a hidden compartment, just big enough to fit a hand. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. This wasn't just a simple scratch or an odd coincidence. There was something buried here, something that had been concealed for who knows how long. Bella stood beside me, whining softly, almost as if urging me to open it. The sense of dread grew stronger with each passing second. What if I was making a mistake? What if I wasn't ready for what I might find? But then the curiosity took over. I couldn't stop now. My heart pounded in my chest as I pressed my fingers against the crack and gently pried it open. The air seemed to grow colder, and for a brief moment, everything in the room went still. I stared down at the small opening, waiting for whatever was about to happen next. Something told me that once I uncovered whatever was hidden inside, nothing would ever be the same again. As I pried open the small compartment, a chill swept through the room, far colder than it should have been for a cozy night indoors. My fingers trembled uncontrollably, the sense of dread growing with each passing second. Bella stood perfectly still beside me, her eyes locked on the opening with an intensity I had never seen before. It was almost as if she knew something was about to be revealed, and she wasn't sure if I was ready for it. I wasn't sure either. The compartment was shallow, barely deep enough to fit my hand, but when I reached inside, I felt something cool, hard, and smooth. My heart skipped a beat. It was an old metal key, rusted, but clearly aged, its edges worn down from years of neglect. I pulled it out, staring at it in confusion. A key? What could this unlock? Why was it hidden in the floor of my living room? And why had Bella been so adamant about me finding it? I looked at her, her ears perked up, her gaze unwavering. She seemed to be waiting for something, as though she knew more than I did, like she was guiding me toward something far bigger than I could comprehend. I turned the key over in my hand, feeling its weight, the cold metal sending a strange shiver up my spine. There was no label, no indication of what it could possibly open, but it was undeniable. It had been placed here deliberately, and I had just uncovered it. Then, a noise, a faint sound, almost like a whisper, but too soft to pinpoint. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. The house was silent just moments before, but now something felt off. The walls seemed to close in around me, the very air thickening. I glanced over at Bella again, her body rigid, her tail still. Her ears were up, her head cocked slightly to the side, as if listening to something I couldn't hear. I stood up slowly, heart racing. The key in my hand felt heavier now, almost as if it was pulling me toward something, urging me to find whatever it was meant to unlock. I looked around the room, but everything appeared normal, too normal. Yet the longer I stood there, the more I felt the weight of something unseen pressing in from all sides. A sudden, sharp knock echoed through the house, jolting me out of my trance. I whipped around, my pulse spiking. Who could be at the door at this hour? My heart raced, and the key felt hotter in my hand. I hesitated, fear creeping up my spine, but curiosity and an odd sense of urgency urged me to move. I stepped toward the door cautiously, glancing one last time at Bella. She hadn't moved, but there was something in her eyes, something knowing, something that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. As I reached for the door, another knock came, this one louder, more insistent. My breath quickened. Was it possible that someone knew about the key? Was this all somehow connected? My mind was spinning, my thoughts tumbling over each other in a chaotic mess. I slowly turned the doorknob and opened the door, my heart pounding in my chest. But no one was there. Only a small, weathered envelope sat on the doorstep, its edges crinkled and worn as if it had been sitting there for days. My name was scribbled on the front in a hasty, uneven hand. There was no return address, no clue as to who had left it. I bent down, my hands shaking, and picked up the envelope, my mind racing with questions. What was this? How was it all connected? I tore open the envelope, and inside I found a single piece of paper. The writing was smudged, the ink barely legible, but one word stood out above the rest: run. My blood ran cold. I turned toward Bella, who was now standing at the threshold, staring at me with an almost eerie calmness. The key, the letter, her strange behavior, it was all connected. But how? And what was I supposed to do now? The answer was clear. The stakes had just been raised. Whoever or whatever was behind this, they wanted me to follow the trail to uncover the mystery. But at what cost? And what would happen if I chose not to? The tension was unbearable, and the silence in the room felt suffocating. Something big was coming, and I wasn't sure I was ready to face it. I stood there, the letter trembling in my hands, my mind a whirlwind of confusion and fear. Bella's gaze never wavered, her steady eyes locked onto mine as though she understood the urgency of the moment. I glanced down at the key again, then back at the door. The word run echoed in my mind, but I couldn't move. What was I supposed to run from? What was happening here? Without thinking, I slammed the door shut and ran for the basement door, the only place in the house that felt somewhat removed from the chaos around me. As I descended into the darkness, the weight of the key felt heavier, like a burden I couldn't escape. The air in the basement was cold, the scent of old wood and dust making my skin crawl. Bella followed closely behind, her presence a comfort, though a strange one. There was a part of me that knew what I had to do next, but I wasn't sure I was ready for it. I reached the farthest corner of the basement, where a small old chest sat. The key seemed to call to me, urging me to unlock it. My hands were trembling as I inserted the key into the rusty lock. With a click, the chest opened, revealing a pile of old papers and books. But one item stood out: a small leather-bound journal. I hesitated before picking it up, a sense of foreboding washing over me. Bella was at my feet now, watching me intently, as if she knew this was the moment everything would change. I opened the journal, the pages yellowed with age. The first few pages were filled with strange symbols, but as I flipped through, I found a name, my name, and beneath it, a series of cryptic notes detailing everything about my life. Things no one could have known: where I lived, my habits, the places I'd been, the people I'd met. The details were too precise, too unsettling. But the final note was the most chilling. You've been chosen. Suddenly, the basement light flickered, and I heard a noise behind me, a scraping sound, faint but growing louder. I spun around, but there was nothing there. Just the eerie silence, the kind that presses against your chest, making it hard to breathe. I turned back to Bella, her eyes wide, filled with a knowing sorrow. That's when I saw it, a shadow in the corner of the room, slowly growing larger. I backed away, my heart pounding in my ears. And then, before I could react, the shadow took shape, something I never could have prepared for. It was a person, but not just any person. It was a figure dressed in tattered old clothing, their face obscured by a dark hood. My blood ran cold. The figure stepped forward, its footsteps deliberate, and in that moment, I realized this was no coincidence. This was planned. The journal, the key, Bella's behavior, it was all connected, a twisted path leading me here. And now I was face to face with whatever force had orchestrated this. But then, just as the figure reached for me, a sudden loud bang echoed from upstairs. The door to the basement flew open, and another figure entered. This one familiar. It was my neighbor, someone I thought I could trust, someone who had always been there. But the look in their eyes was cold, calculating. Before I could speak, they rushed forward, slamming the chest shut. "You weren't supposed to find it," they muttered, their voice shaking. "You weren't supposed to know." The figure in the corner faded into the shadows, and just like that, everything went quiet again. The mystery deepened, the answers slipping further out of reach. As my neighbor stared at me, I realized with growing horror that I wasn't the one who had been chosen. Bella had been, and the story was far from over. I stood frozen, my mind struggling to catch up with what had just happened. My neighbor, the person I had trusted for years, was standing in front of me, breathing heavily, as if the weight of the moment was too much to bear. The look in their eyes was full of guilt, fear, and something darker, something I couldn't fully comprehend. "What do you mean Bella was the one chosen?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper, as though saying it aloud might make the truth too real. My neighbor sighed, stepping back into the shadows of the basement. "It's all part of something bigger. Bella wasn't just a pet to you, she was a symbol, a part of an ancient ritual, one that has been passed down through generations. And you, Noman, you were never meant to find out." My heart raced as I tried to process their words. Bella, the dog I had loved and cared for, was caught in something far darker than I ever could have imagined. It wasn't just an odd coincidence that she had been acting strange. She had been trying to tell me something the whole time, guiding me toward the truth, toward the key to unlocking a much deeper mystery. Before I could ask more questions, my neighbor turned to leave, their face a mask of regret. "I'm sorry, but it's too late now. The forces have already been set in motion." I glanced down at Bella, who was sitting quietly beside me, her eyes filled with the same understanding she had shown from the beginning. For the first time, I realized that she had known all along, that she had been more than just a pet. She was a protector, a guide, and now, perhaps, my only chance at making things right. As my neighbor disappeared into the shadows, I took a deep breath, knowing that the true journey was just beginning. There were answers to be found, and I would uncover them, no matter the cost. But one thing was certain: I wasn't alone. Bella and I would face whatever came next together.